Okay, testing 1, 2. Today we have episode numero 8. Wait, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Numero 8. And we have on the lovely Emma McAdams today. And she, oh my gosh, this episode was so awesome. It was such a great conversation. And it really blessed me to edit it the other day because, again, sometimes I edit episodes weeks after I record them, and it's just really awesome to kind of get a refresher on a conversation, especially this one in particular. So anywho, Emma is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she has been in this field of change and growth since 2004. So she received her master's degree in marriage and family therapy from Utah State University, and she has a ton of background ranging from eating disorders to juvenile correction centers to summer camps to family therapy. So she's just experienced all across the board. And anyways, so on this episode we will be discussing cognitive distortions, different types of distortions, and how to work with those in your mind and how they can affect you on the day-to-day, and you may not even realize that they are. Rewiring neural pathways in your mind. You are not your diagnosis. We go over light therapy and looking at your emotions rather than through them. So basically all sorts of good little nuggets in this episode, and I really liked it, and I have a feeling you will too. All right, so we are officially... Oh, that's my dog, sorry. We're officially recording, and I decided I'm going to do all the all the introductions on my own time, but I'll do like a pre-recorded intro so we can just kind of get into it. But anyways, so we were talking a second about your YouTube channel, and I literally love it. Especially, I love the intro video that you chose at the top of the page that just starts playing, where you talk about how you just want to have resources that are free and available and just easy to access for people to have and to get them through whatever facet of mental illness that they're struggling with. Can you talk a little bit about therapy in a nutshell and also your online course?
Oh yeah. So I think there's so many obstacles to people getting mental health resources. So like therapy, there's the stigma. People are embarrassed. It's kind of hard sometimes to find a therapist who meshes with you, and then it's also expensive, and insurance like doesn't cover it. And so as I'm, I worked full time in therapy for a long time, and realized like how many people weren't even accessing those resources. And so then I had kids, and I wanted to, at least in their early years, really focus on them. So I quit my full-time job. I'm home with the kids, and I'm still like, a lot of people are reaching out for help, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't be your therapist. And but my brain just like kept working on this problem. So I'm always like thinking about ideas and thinking about stuff. So I decided to start making these resources more accessible by making videos and making blog posts about these mental health these mental health topics. And I also, I'm kind of strongly opinionated that like a lot of mental health issues can be treated. Whereas
Amen.
I think like the mindset is that a lot of people think, oh, if I have a depression or an anxiety diagnosis, that's going to be permanent. Like that's who I am.
Yes.
And I think, well, there is a tiny chance that this will be a permanent or chronic condition, but you should try like 100 things first, because there's 100 things to try, and most people just don't even know.
Yeah, and I do feel like also maybe if you are in that percentage where it is a permanent chronic thing, even then there's things you can do to learn how to work with your mind and to alleviate those daily chronic things. Like I have OCD, and my therapist has told me like, honey, you're gonna have this till you leave this good earth. He's like, but you can live a very happy and fulfilling and good life. You can learn how to work with this and alleviate a lot of the symptoms and the issues.
Absolutely. Yeah. And OCD is a great example, because OCD tends to be more genetically predisposed, but there's that whole spectrum of functioning where you can get so much health within everything that's going on, and to the point where it doesn't interfere with your functioning anymore.
Yes, exactly. And there's times where like I don't even feel like I have OCD and I forget that I have OCD, and I learn like certain things that kind of spark it and stressors that can kind of amplify it. And so like me in a really intense season of OCD versus me on a typical day to day are completely different worlds. And it
Hmm.
feels like when you're in that intense season, like this is it, this is forever, this is who I am now. Great, I'm stuck like this,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's not the case.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really normal to feel like, especially when you're in the deep depths of any,
Mm.
struggle, like this is permanent or forever. And I think it's helpful to just remind yourself, like for anyone out there, like, oh, this is something I'm experiencing right now. It's real, it's not your fault. And it comes and goes in waves, and let's see what skills we can learn, what skills we can work on to just make it a little bit better.
Yeah, no, 100%. And one thing too, again, if everyone listening, her YouTube channel is a wealth of knowledge. But there was something that I had written down that you said a mental health diagnosis doesn't mean you have this, but rather you are experiencing this.
Yeah, this is one of my most strongly held beliefs. Like I really believe I take kind of a unique approach to identity in that some people put a lot of time into or effort into deciding what they are or who they are or even discovering who they are as a maybe as a label. And my approach, it stems from acceptance and commitment therapy, which I mean the technical term is self as context, right? Which is this idea that you are an experiencer
Mm.
and you are experiencing this world and this life and these emotions and these thoughts, but you are not your thoughts.
Mm.
You are not your emotions. You're the thing having the thoughts and the emotions.
Yes. And okay, I'm going to break up another quote that you said that ties into this.
Mm.
Gosh, what was it? It was really good. It was something about seeing your thoughts, not feeling your thoughts. I shouldn't have written in cursive for my notes because that just kind of. Oh, cognitive diffusion.
Yeah,
Looking at your thoughts instead of through your thoughts. Can you talk a
yeah,
little bit about cognitive diffusion, please?
for sure. Yeah. So cognitive diffusion is another ACT principle. Acceptance and commitment therapy is the short term for it is ACT. And the idea is, well, I mean, there's six main principles. I already talked about one, self as context, and then the other, one of the other ones is cognitive diffusion. So it's this idea that when we're deep in the midst of an intense thought, like, oh, I'm such a failure, or I'm such a terrible person, or I'm depressed, I'm so depressed, why is this happening to me? So these are the examples of types of thoughts that when you're in them, they feel like reality and they feel like
Mm,
everything that's happening, they feel like they're true, and when we think these thoughts and we're really fused with them, when we're bound and stuck and only in the middle of these thoughts, it's kind of like a fish underwater. The fish doesn't even notice that they're in the water. Like it's just what it is. Like we just breathe air, we don't think about it, we don't notice it, we're just like, it's like looking through our thoughts. That's what cognitive fusion is. So when we think something, we are completely just in it. We don't even notice we're thinking it. And cognitive diffusion is the process of stepping back and noticing those thoughts. So it'd be like the fish jumping out of the water, looking down and being like, oh, hey, that's water. That's what I was in. But
mhm.
it's not just reality. And so cognitive diffusion is about taking the time to practice noticing that you are thinking, and then you notice that you're the person who's having the thoughts instead of the thoughts being reality.
Mm,
And then
yeah.
an even further step of that is noticing that you're having the thoughts. And that's where you really get into like self as context, right? Like
Right.
I am a noticer, I am an experiencer. And so
Mm,
when you separate from these thoughts just a little bit, you can notice them pass and be like, well, there's an interesting thought. I'm going to choose whether I believe that, or I'm going to choose whether I act on that, instead of like, oh, everything I think must be true.
right. And that kind of makes me think about, with meditation,
Mhm.
where you're supposed to sit. Like I've mentioned this practice before, but one thing I really like is the idea of setting a timer for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute, whatever,
Mhm.
and just quietly noticing your thoughts and objectively looking at them, or feelings and objectively feeling the feelings or thinking the thoughts, or, oh, that's a scary thought. Oh, that's a interesting. Okay. It's a thought and it brings about fear. Okay. I see it. I acknowledge it. You let it pass. So it's kind of the idea of just kind of taking a step back basically from the whirlwind of it all and just seeing it from more of like an outside perspective is kind of
Yeah.
the, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Mindfulness is one of the ways to practice cognitive diffusion or meditation, right? Where you sit and you notice that you're having a thought and then you bring your attention back to something else, like whether it be the breath or what whatever you're focusing on. And that helps you kind of separate instead of be fused with those thoughts, right? Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah, and I feel like when you just look at them, it kind of takes the fear away from them because it's like, oh, these don't have to be a part of me. These are just here. But now you kind of go from no choice to having this choice. And that also kind of reminds me of neural pathways. And that is something you talk about. And neural pathways are something I am very, very, very interested in because I feel like there's so much truth to it and science behind it. And can you please explain a little bit about your opinions on neural pathways and how people can actually shape the thoughts in their own mind and their perception of reality?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So when we think, our brain passes little bits of electrical and chemical information between neurons. And when we do that a lot, it creates these neural pathways, which are kind of like if you imagine a field or like a scrubby place. Like in Utah, I live in Utah, and we have a lot of sagebrush and a lot of low bushes and low weeds all along the foothills of these mountains, right? So if you imagine an area with a lot of bushes and stuff, and then when the animals, like the game, like the deer, they start walking through this, they break these little pathways through the field. And the more you walk on a pathway, the wider and thicker and smoother it gets, right? So like the plants stop growing there and it gets easier and easier to walk that pathway. Well, in our brain, these neural pathways, the ones that we use the most, those are the ones that get smoothest and fastest and easiest to use. So like physically, they can actually see with modern imaging, they can actually see how people who practice meditation, how the structures in their brain change. Or they did a really interesting study with these taxi drivers in London. They have to take this huge test, and they have to memorize like every single street in London, and they have to memorize all the events and all this, that, and the other. I mean, like literally millions of items of information. And they could actually measure in these people's brain that the pathways in their brain were changing when they were studying for this test. And so the same thing goes with our brain with mental health, right? So if you consistently think a thought, like you mess up, you make a mistake or whatever, and then you have this thought like, oh my gosh, I'm such a failure, I'm such a loser, and you think that thought,
Yeah.
pretty soon that neural pathway becomes really thick and really wide and really easy to think, and that just becomes your habitual response. Like every time you mess up, you're like, well, I'm a failure, oh well, there I go again. And then pretty soon that can lead to this feeling of hopelessness and like, why try? Why get
Yeah.
up in the morning? And then that can lead to this chronic state of depression, where you're constantly having the experience of sadness. You're constantly having the experience of these, hopeless thinking patterns. So then what we do in therapy and what people do in their lives is they try to start challenging those thoughts and creating new neural pathways by thinking something else that's going to be more helpful for them. So you might replace that with like, well, instead of thinking, oh, I'm just a failure, you could try one of a dozen different thoughts. And I challenge people to think of like maybe 6 different ways of thinking about that. Well, oh, I made a mistake, but that's okay. That's only human. Or a different way of thinking about that is, oh, what can I learn from that experience? I can grow through my mistakes. Or you can think, I mean, there's a bunch of other ways to think, right? A bunch of other ways to talk to yourself and be really gentle to yourself and kind, or you can beat yourself up. And so in therapy, we might encourage someone to think, well, okay, let's see how you can grow from this. And then you start walking that new neural pathway, you start thinking that thought more often, and it might feel really weird, or you might not believe it at first, or might,
Right.
uh-huh. Yeah, like it's hard to be gentle to yourself when you've been mean to yourself for a long time, right? And as you practice that, literally the physical wires in your brain, these neural pathways, they change and they get thicker and they get wider. And then it gets easier and easier to treat yourself in a kinder way. And then that's actually going to change what chemicals your brain puts out. And that's going to change, how you feel and how you think. And over time, like, so if you imagine, like I was using the analogy of this field or this mountain that you're trying to climb up, and it's got all these bushes and scrubby things. At first, thinking that way is really hard because there's still bushes in your way. You're having to take a new pathway instead of the old easy pathway. But then over time, the more you do it, the wider and broader and smoother that's going to get. And it's going to get easier and easier feel better and overcome things like anxiety and depression.
Hmm. And so the neural pathways that were initially there in this hypothetical person that we're using, that were negative, I'm assuming the less you use those, the more those kind of dissipate and go away.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So our brain is plastic, which means our brain is flexible and moldable and bendable. And scientists are learning a lot more about this because now we have imaging that can really measure this. But what that means is your brain is constantly adapting to what you're experiencing and what you're thinking and what you're practicing. And it is constantly trimming off the neurons it doesn't need anymore. So
Mm.
15 years ago, I lived in Argentina for a year and a half. I learned Spanish. I spoke Spanish fluently.
Sweet.
And now, 15 years later, I was at the park yesterday with my kids. There was someone speaking Spanish. I tried to speak Spanish to her, and it's like a mess, right? Because I haven't been using it. I haven't been using my Spanish, and my brain is literally trimming away those neural pathways. So just like that,
Wow.
like just like we forget things if we beat the crap out of ourselves and call ourselves losers or whatever, and we stop doing that after a while, it's gonna be those pathways are gonna get trimmed off. Our brain
Mm.
literally trims them off, and just like a pathway in the field or up the mountain, the weeds start growing back in, making it rougher and thicker. And so that pathway might still be there, but it'd take more work to get there.
Would self affirmations kind of be a form of creating those new neural pathways? Like looking in the mirror in the morning and being like, maybe someone who feels like super awkward in the dating scene or something. They're like,
Mhm.
I'm very confident and I am a lovable person. I don't know, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it
Yeah.
might, like you said, it might be awkward to say those things at first. It
Mhm.
might be awkward to think that way, and they might feel like they're just straight up lying to themselves. But I've noticed with self affirmations, the more you do them, the more you kind of start to believe them, or it becomes easier, or they do start to kind of, those pop up thoughts start being less negative and start being more positive.
Yep.
Is that kind of a form of, or one way that people can kind of create those pathways?
Yeah, it totally is. It totally is. And for some people, it works really well. And it does. You have to just start like thinking and practicing new ways of talking to yourself. And so whatever way you do that can be really helpful. Now for me, looking in the mirror and like saying nice things to myself, that just never quite like did it for me. But for some
Right.
people, it does.
Right.
And for me, like in general, I'd use some other things like I'll use like a self-compassion meditation,
Mm.
or I'll just like for me it works a little better to just challenge the lies and try and replace them with something else. So like if I ever am feeling really down on myself, for me like having kind of rules like, oh, you may not call yourself XYZ, like that is not allowed. So if I start to like think that way, then I just kind of replace that with, well, I'm going to learn and grow. Like that for me is kind of my go-to, is like my growth mindset. and,
Yes.
and for some people, like affirmations is like totally the quickest, easiest, most awesome way for them. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but that's exactly what's happening with affirmations. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And also too, I agree with the mirror thing. The mirror thing is a little uncomfortable. I'm like, I'm staring into my own eyes. That they're like
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
one thing that helps me if I do any type of affirmation,
Mhm.
I I have like, for instance, Douglas Block, he recommends writing a vision of wellness, which is kind of like a long affirmation. So I might just read that out loud. I won't look in the mirror, but I'll just read out loud and just try my best to mean what I'm saying. And I've noticed, at first it starts out so awkward, like, or not awkward, but just foreign, I guess, like this
Mhm.
doesn't feel real. But then
Mhm.
the more you do it, or I've heard some people also say it helps to go to sleep imagining like the best version of yourself. So I've done that in the past as well, especially when I was really going through the ringer and just pulling out all the stops. Like, I'm going to do everything I can possibly do to get better, like I,
Yeah.
I, I would even fall asleep at night, just like envisioning um, the best version of me, but not just the finished product, but the things it would take to get there. So I would picture me like working out and eating healthy and taking time for my mental health routine and just different things like that. That's not only the final result, but the process as well.
That is such a like awesome practice, and it's something I've just like kind of just started doing, like maybe in the last 3 or 4 months.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, like I think what we visualize, what we bring to our mind has a lot of power over ourselves. And
Yeah.
yeah, if you think about how you feel, like, so if we talk about imagination and visualization, like as if like watching a movie, when you watch a scary movie, your body physically pumps out adrenaline and cortisol, right? Like it
Mm.
creates physical changes in you. And if you worry, like if you just think about the worst possible thing that could happen tomorrow, that's bringing to mind the negative things. And all that does, it runs a it treads that neural pathway of worry and fear. And so,
Gosh, I got a
mhm.
lot of those pathways I'm trying to take care of.
Oh yeah, me too. I mean, a lot of us do. And so we can really shift from that worry to that positivity by practicing intentional visualization, imagination, and
Yeah.
like bringing to mind mindfulness, right? Bringing to mind, focusing on the things we do want.
Yeah.
Imagining ourselves taking those little steps to wellness, like that's great, right? Imagining like how is this going to feel when I start exercising, right? Even 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, like baby steps. Have you heard of the book Atomic Habits?
I haven't read it yet.
Uh, I've started. I freaking can't find that book. It's lost somewhere in this tiny apartment of mine, but I want to find it because it's so good. But it talks
Mhm.
about like small shifts creating large outcomes, like even if it, because small habits compile and compound and build up over time. I'm sure there's a lot of different books that kind of discuss the same concept, but I think that to myself, and it does help with my having grace with myself and the I am human mantra or whatever. Like, you know what, like this is better than yesterday, and this is a good decision, and these good decisions will pile up and create even bigger decisions that will bring my life in a more positive direction. But also, again, with the self visualization, one thing that really struck me, and I know I just kind of mentioned this, but when I would daydream, because I have a habit of just kind of being in la la land sometimes, I try to stay present, but sometimes when I daydream, I notice I just picture like when I published a book, or when I, you know, have my podcast fully launched and it's going. But then I think to myself, you know, what about the work that puts into it? Because someone mentioned that one time on a talk I was listening to, or a podcast. They were like, also imagine the effort that takes and the work that it takes, and that'll help gear your brain to not just expect things to fall into your lap, but to like remind you of the steps you need to take and make you more likely to take those steps. So I'll be like, okay, here's me at the boxing gym practicing, or here's me diligently taking 20 minutes, even a week, just to write,
Mhm.
So that's something that I find interesting.
I
And
think that's an awesome approach. Yeah, just like imagining those baby steps you'll take to accomplish this big picture, right? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Because it feels so insurmountable, but it's like if you just break that up into smaller bits and pieces, even if, like, I would rather spend 2 years slowly, for instance, working away at a degree than doing nothing at all,
Hmm.
because it feels too overwhelming. Because or even to get one semester's worth of classes done in 2 years, because that time is passing regardless. So you might
Yeah.
as well just take those small steps, and at the end of the day you can look back and be like, wow, I've accomplished this much in that time, or wow, you just feel better, like this weight gets lifted, like, and when you don't kind of give into that. But also, do you think we could talk a little bit about cognitive distortions and all or nothing mentalities?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah. So cognitive distortions are a way of thinking that twists reality. And there's a couple, well, about 10 or 12 different types of them that people have kind of identified and laid out. And you know, understanding cognitive distortions can really help people gain a lot better mental health. Whether you're working with depression or anxiety or perfectionism or people pleasing or whatever
Oh,
it is. And so, one of the first ones that a lot of people do they don't realize is all or nothing thinking. And that's where if something feels really intense, we start labeling it as 100% one way or the other. So, all or nothing thinking is like, well, I got a C on that test. I'm failing this class. I'm a complete failure. Or you start thinking, I'm never going to pass college, or I'm never going to succeed. And you start using these really exaggerated words. So I've kind of made rules for myself that like, I'm not really allowed to use always, never, terrible, horrible, like these, any words that are really extreme.
mm,
And that's because when we think that way, it makes it so that we are like incapable of acting. It like disables us from trying again. Um, yeah, so that's one of them. All or nothing thinking is one type of cognitive distortion. And so you really with cognitive distortions, you can start by like learning about cognitive distortions, what are they? And then asking someone to help you identify them in your life. Because usually when we're doing them, we think that it's reality. We usually think that like this is just how it is because it feels so
real.
awful. Yeah.
And awful, but like
Yeah.
real. It's like, this is how it is. I'm just seeing it for what it is, and it
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah. Like if you're driving down the road, you're like, everyone's the worst driver ever. These people are such idiots, right? Like that's an example of like, oh, this feels like really upsetting. Yeah, like this is really stressful.
Yes.
But the truth is like, well, maybe not everyone is the worst driver ever. Like this person is bothering me right now, or you replace that with like, I feel stressed right now, or I feel scared right now, or I feel angry right now. And those are a little bit more helpful ways to talk about what's going on. Because if everyone's the worst driver ever, then your only option is just to be stressed out and mad.
Yeah. And also, I really like what you're saying about literally saying to yourself, I feel stressed. I feel angry. Like, what am I feeling? You take it, you go from just feeling the emotion or knowing it's there to like kind of getting to the root of the emotion, or at least being able to kind of talk yourself down. Like, there have been times and still are times where I'll just be super like stressed over something and anxious when I shouldn't be. But like you said, A, noticing these things going on, and then B, being able to kind of talk to yourself and self dialogue with yourself. And that's something I'm trying to do more and more. And at first it feels silly, but it really does help. Like, here's an example. I was walking through Hobby Lobby this must have been 2 months ago now at this point, but I needed something at Hobby Lobby for work, and I was feeling stressed. I was agitated. Like, I could feel it in my chest, like that kind of stress where it's just like there. And you're like, I'm like, why am I so stressed? I'm annoyed. I can't find this. Am I kind of hungry? I feel anxious. Why am I getting so hyped up right now? And like, I'm pacing up and down the Hobby Lobby aisles. It's supposed to be one of the happiest places on earth. And I'm like stressed.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of was like stopping and talking to myself, like, okay, what's wrong? And I was like, I'm annoyed right now. like literally like psycho talking to myself. But but after going back and forth myself, what's wrong? I'm feeling annoyed. I feel stressed. I'm agitated. I can't find what I need. That's okay. Just pause, breathe, think about it. What aisle are you in? I'm in an aisle, like literally. And I hope that's a healthy thing to do, because like I was doing that and it really helped me kind of stop, talk myself down, understand. Like, I was able to vent to myself, kind of like I was literally able to vent to myself and just be like, this is bothering me and I feel these feelings and I don't know why, and I'm agitated because I'm agitated because I shouldn't be. And then I was like, that's and I was just like, that's okay, like it's all good. So
yeah, what you're describing there, that's called emotion processing. And
good.
most people have never been taught this. I'm actually working on a course on emotion processing right now. And it's just this basic skills of like, let's notice what you're feeling and notice what it feels like to feel that, and then give it a name, and then explore it a little bit and see if there's something you're doing that's maybe making it a little bit worse. Like you're saying, like, I'm getting agitated about being agitated.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, I'm using a cognitive distortion and that's making it worse, right? And then when we do that, when we work through that process of emotions, they tend to resolve. Like emotions just tend they tend to smooth themselves out when we sit with them for a minute and think about them slowly. The problem is emotions can be really overwhelming and they turn off the thinking part of our brain. And then we tend to just like avoid them. Our automatic reaction is like, just make this go away. And then right? Like, just make this, anything that'll make this go away, I'll do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. You inadvertently, it's like you feel the anxiety, you feel the anger, you feel the, feeling of being left out or whatever. And you're also feeling it, but at the same time blocking those feelings unknowingly. You think you're feeling it, but you're not truly, like, you're just there shoving the door shut while they're all trying to break in, and you're like kind of pressing with all your might to keep the door shut, but really you just got to open the door and let those feelings come in. That's something I always thought I was feeling my emotions. And then one day my therapist was like, I don't think you let yourself feel your emotions. And I was like, I feel tons of emotions. What are you talking about? But then, like,
I'm drowning in emotions right now. What are you, like,
I'm drowning, man. Can't you see?
Yeah, exactly.
But I thought about that, let that simmer, and I was like, dang, hot dang. I feel them. I know they're there, but I don't truly just let myself feel them and habituate with that, and just like let myself experience the sadness or the anxiety that I'm feeling. I just kind of clench up and my jaw gets all clenchy and like,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think most people don't know that that is a skill that can be learned. Like it's not just something you do or you don't do, but it's like actually this is a skill. Like this emotion processing is a skill, and most people have never been taught it. And some people learn it by absorbing from good people around them, and some people don't have that much problem because their brains are, I don't know, magically immune to emotions or something. But like most of us need to learn the skill of like how to feel an emotion, especially an uncomfortable one, an emotion that is not enjoyable, and how to feel it, open to it, slow down, process through it. And as soon as you do that, it's like, oh, okay. And then it melts away much of the time. I would say 90% of the time. And then there's 10% of the time that emotion stays. And the process of being like open to it just is like keeps you from making it worse.
Yes, seriously. Just like habituation has helped me so much, which sounds so crazy at first, like allow yourself to be anxious technically, or allow yourself to feel anger.
Yeah.
But like when you just like say, all right, I'm here, just do it. Let's feel it. And like I've noticed that helps it just go away so much quicker. Because you're like, I'm not afraid of this. Actually, it's just a feeling. It's even if it's a physical sensation, because a lot of my anxiety comes across physically, like physical sensations, and it's scary. But I'm like, all right, this is how I feel. Bring it on,
Yes. Yeah, bring it on. And like the thing is, like the weird thing about anxiety and a lot of emotions, like the more we try and push them away, the stronger power they have over us. And then as soon as we say, okay, I can feel anxiety and be okay. I'm not saying I want to feel it. I'm not saying I like feeling it. I'm not saying I enjoy feeling it. I'm saying I don't have a choice. I can either feel it like now wholeheartedly, or I can push it off and feel it for a lot longer.
Yes.
So I'm just okay. I'm willing to feel this.
Yeah.
I'm willing to be here. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's kind of the approach I've taken in the past as well, with anxiety. Like when you said it's going to be here regardless. If there's been times I'm afraid to go on a trip, or I'm afraid to go out somewhere, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have it either alone in my bed or, at the roller rink, having fun at the disco. Like I'm just gonna do that, and odds are if I can go do that, it'll alleviate, you know what I mean? So
right. Like I'm gonna have anxiety home in my room alone, or I'm gonna have anxiety at the roller rink. I love that. Yeah, like it's like you can choose,
Yeah, well, one sounds at least a little more fun. Like,
right. Yeah.
And again, a lot of times, when you put yourself out there, like I love the quote of, I think it's something like, fear of the limitations that you have for yourself, or that you set for yourself. So it's like, screw that. I'm not going to let something tell me that I can or can't do the things I want to do. I'm going to do it anyways. And if it comes with me, fine. That's cool. It's not really cool, but you know what I mean? I'm just going to do it.
Yeah, feel the fear and do it anyway, right? Like, yes. Yeah, I love it. Yep, you're preaching to the choir. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and too, I noticed it's almost like exposure therapy. Like the more you do it, your brain learns, oh, I'm okay. I did this thing and I didn't die. Everything was cool. And then you feel less and less anxiety. It's like the more you put yourself in those uncomfortable situations, the less discomfort you feel.
Yeah.
It kind of becomes less and less of a thing, I feel like.
Well, yeah. Two things happen, right? Your brain gets like a lot better at feeling that emotion. Like you develop like it's like brain muscles to like feel anxiety and be okay. And then the other thing is your brain learns like, oh, I can actually be okay while feeling this. I guess that sounds like kind of the same thing, but your brain, it's self-efficacy, the belief in your ability to do hard things.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that. Self-efficacy. Try to say that 5 times fast. Right. I won't.
How many F's in one word, right? Yeah. Self-efficacy.
So it's definitely so important to be able to acknowledge and to notice when these thoughts are there. And I know you mentioned already that you could ask someone, a close friend or family member, to kind of show you where those all or nothing or cognitive distortions are. But what are some other ways that someone, because it's really hard to know where those are. Like, what are ways that people can go about catching themselves so they can kind of call that out, point it out, and change their thought pattern?
That's a great question. So if you just Google cognitive distortions like list, you'll get some printouts of like these 10 cognitive distortions, and you can read what they are. I've also got videos out on 3 or 4 of them. I've got a video on all or nothing thinking, black and white thinking, mental filtering, and catastrophizing. So those are
Ooh.
4 of them.
Yeah.
And there's another half dozen, like overgeneralizing, personalizing. So that's like taking things personally. So if you're like around someone who's upset, you just assume they're mad at you. Or if, someone's rude, you assume that it's your fault or something like that. And there's a bunch of other ones. So the first thing you want to do is learn about them. Just go read one of these charts. I'm like, what are cognitive distortions? And then if you have a close friend who you trust, who's safe, then you could take that list to them and be like, okay, do you see me doing these things? And like when I'm really upset, do I do these things? So just like, and again, this is emotion processing, right? Noticing it and then naming it and then replacing it with something else. Was that your question? Did I answer your question?
No, that was very good. And too, while you were talking and you mentioned with the list, I mean, because I feel like sometimes our cognitive distortions stay in our mind. So in some cases, it might be hard for someone on the outside to help point them out. But again, like you just said, if you have that list, and maybe you could like print out, keep it on you, make it your background saver on your phone, like keep it in your notes on your iPhone or something. I feel like just even that, just keeping an awareness, putting it on your mirror, like that might remind you, like maybe you're getting out of the shower, you look in the mirror, you think something negative about yourself, and you're like, hey, cognitive distortion, all or nothing. Like I'm telling myself I'm always like this ugly thing or whatever, but really it's just a bad hair day, or I'm bloated, like who knows, so there's like all these different things. And I got so excited when you said catastrophizing, which really catastrophizing is such a horrible thing. But that was a cognitive distortion that blew my mind, because I have dealt a lot with being a hypochondriac. So I'll be like, maybe see like a blotch on my skin or something, or maybe like I'm like, was that bump always there? Oh my gosh, it's probably cancer. I'm probably dying. I bet I'm terminal. I bet it's been going on for months now. Like it sounds so intense. It sounds so intense and absurd, but like these are the thoughts that were in my mind and ingrained, and that I believe so strongly. And I would be in fear, fear, riddled with anxiety. Like there's been a few times in my life where I've been like, this is it. This is the time that I'm dying. Like,
oh my goodness. Yeah.
It's horrible. I'm laughing at it now, thank God, because like I've come so far and I've learned so much. And like you said, being able to point out these cognitive distortions, like I might feel a twinge in my shoulder and I'll be like, oh my gosh, what if it's like cancer? What if, whatever. I'm like, no, that's catastrophizing. You're thinking of the absolute worst case scenario. More likely than not, this is just a weird shoulder pain because you freaking box like weekly.
Yeah, maybe, huh?
Like let's be a little realistic with ourselves here, And then I also tell myself I've become a lot more comfortable with the fact of like, and if it is ever something serious, like I want to be living in the moment and be so grateful and not look back at years and years spent in worry and fear over what's happening maybe 10 years from now, God forbid, but you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it just takes a lot of power away from it, I feel like.
Yeah. Yep. I think so too. And you mentioned writing it down. I think for me, I would say this is essential. I'm going to quote Nick Wignall, who's my favorite blogger, but he says, never worry in your head. Like as soon as you write this down on paper, so maybe like make a paper with 2 columns, and on the one side write down like, this is what it looks like when my brain is like kaboof, this is what catastrophizing or all or nothing thinking looks like, and you identify it and you write it down on that piece of paper. And then on the other side of that piece of paper, write what would I replace this with that helps me function more in line with my values. So you just gave an example, right? Like this probably isn't anything, right? You soothe yourself. This is probably because I box, right? That's a much more realistic interpretation than like, I'm dying of cancer and fibromyalgia and COVID all at the same time, right? But like, and then the other thing you said, the other thing that's like more helpful is like, even if this is something, I'm going to choose a life that's not based on fear.
Right.
This is values. I'm going to choose a life based on what I want my life to be about, and I'm going to live it. And I'm not going to let fear run my life.
Hey, freaking men, man. Because if you can't change that crap, you might as well just make the best out of what you got. So
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Let me see here. How are we doing on time? We got about 10 minutes left. One question that I always love to ask people when they come on is, what does your mental health routine look like?
Yeah. So for me, I love sleep. I love getting, I love going to bed. I go to bed at like 9 o'clock, sometimes 8:30
Good
sometimes.
for you. Bless
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. But it's also because I physically can't sleep in the mornings. Like I
Mm.
never sleep in past 5 or 6.
Whoa.
So like even if I went to bed at 1 in the morning, I wouldn't be able to sleep in. So for me to get enough sleep, I have to go to bed early, and that helps my brain function a little better. Um, Other things I do, for me, it's essential that I pray and I read my scriptures every morning. That helps me feel centered. I know some people like to meditate or do other grounding things. And then exercise is really important. It's hard with kids. I like to exercise. I try and get outside and go for a walk every day. And if not, I try and do some stretching or some yoga.
Hmm.
Um, Lately, I've been using a light box in the mornings. And I've read about these, I've talked about these, I've shared about these, and I started using one and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great.
What? What's a light
Yeah,
box? Is this artificial light to mimic sunlight during the
yes.
winter?
Yes, that's it. Yep, artificial
Holy
light that
crap.
mimics sunlight in the winter. And so I just made a video on this, and this company sent me a couple free ones, and I was like, oh, I'll try this. And I'd read the research before. The research shows this is mind blowing to me. Research shows that light therapy is as effective with depression, not like seasonal depression, regular old depression. It's as effective as at treating depression as SSRIs, like Prozac, like antidepressant medication.
What?
It's as effective according to like two very large meta-analyses of over 40 studies. Like it so basically when the light hits your eyes, it triggers your brain to release serotonin. And the same thing happens with your skin, right? So like you go to the beach and you feel better. Like
Yeah.
part of that is the sunlight converting vitamin D and
Hmm.
serotonin in your skin. So I've always read about this and I'm like, cool, yeah. And winters have always been like kind of depressing. I'm in like a colder part of the state. I've started doing light therapy and I did it for 2 weeks straight. And after 2 weeks, I was like too energetic. I had to take a couple days off.
What?
Yeah. And I took a couple days off and I like mellowed out a little bit more. And so I went down to just 10 minutes a day, like 5 or 10 minutes. And I still feel like so much more energy.
Wow.
I
That's
like,
so
yeah,
cool.
yeah. Like I'm a believer. I just like a caveat, if anyone out there who's listening does have bipolar or has had manic episodes in the past, light therapy can sometimes trigger that. Um,
Hmm.
but other than that, it's like very low side effects. Like it can make your eyes tired, but other than that, like very few side effects.
So when you say light therapy and you look into the light, I know there's different ways people do light therapy. Do you like stare into it or do you just sit under it and read a book?
So this is my light box. It sits on
Oh.
your desk. You need a big one. Like this is the smaller version. They have like a slightly bigger version. So for those of you who are listening, this is about 6 by 12 inches, and it needs to enter your eyes from a downward angle. So you don't want like the cheap little light boxes on Amazon that are like
Hmm.
4 by 6 inches and they sit on your desk pointing up at your eyes. You want one that's on a stand that comes down at your eyes.
Oh, to mimic the
Um,
sun because the sun comes down.
Yep.
See?
Yep. And then really big light because that also makes it so that you can get the recommended amount of lux. So lux is a measure of how intense a light is. You want 10,000 lux, but the degree of lux depends on how close you are to it. So if you get one of the really small light boxes on Amazon, they'll say they have 10,000 lux, but it's like 10,000 lux at 6 inches. Like you'd have to have it like right at your face. So these bigger ones, you can sit about 16 to 20 inches away from them. In the morning, I just turn it on while I read or while I work for 10 minutes. And you don't have to stare right at it. You don't want to stare right at it. You just want it
Yeah.
to energize. Your eyes have to be open. It's not like you can do it while you're laying in bed asleep. It's not a wake up light. Um, so yeah, your eyes have to be open. You put it like 16 inches from your face with this one. The bigger one, you can be a little further away, like 2 feet. Um, and yeah, just do it. For most people, it's like 20 to 30 minutes, like if you're really severely depressed. But you just track it because I was
Mhm.
surprised. Like within 10 days, I was like, whoa. Like I was really
What?
noticing it. I really was. Now, obviously, I'm not the sort of person who's like anecdotal is like everything, right? Like I'm not just saying like my experience means that your experience is going to be the same. Like the research is really good on it.
What? You are freaking hyping me up right now. Like, okay, so I'm from Florida and
Hmm.
I have lived basically all my life in Florida. Last October, I moved to Tennessee.
Hmm.
Little did I know that I was moving to a town that is just lined up perfectly in a valley with the mountains for tons and tons of rain, tons
Yeah.
and tons of bloom. It was
Yeah.
really, really freaking hard last winter.
Hmm.
And to the point where it was getting me anxious for this winter. Like I was getting
Yeah.
nervous, like it's coming, like so I was already planning on buying like, and again I'm nervous to buy something that doesn't have enough locks or isn't correct. But first of all, I wanted to switch all the light bulbs in my apartment with these sunshine imitating bulbs. And then
Yeah.
secondly, I was going to drop $200 on a big lamp that like is kind of like a rectangle and it like would sit over me
Mhm.
and while I read to try the light therapy.
Yeah.
But now I'm curious, like I wonder like how to know if it's truly a good product and worth your money or you know what I'm saying? Like how do you know how to differentiate with that or
Yeah, so I did some research before I made the video. I did a lot of research. I don't work with sponsors who I don't agree with. I get a lot of people reaching out to me who want me to do like want to pay me to make a video, and I won't because, well, mostly they're supplement companies.
gosh.
So, but yeah, so this brand that reached out to me, I think is a really good one. They're called Carex,
Mhm.
Carex. And this light that I'm using on my desk is a little bit smaller of a light. It's like $70 on Amazon, I think.
What?
And then
Dude.
the
Sorry.
bigger one, that's all right. No, it's all good. The
I'm
bigger
getting so
one
excited.
is called the Daylight Classic, and I think it's $110 on Amazon.
And is that one more of like a standing lamp?
No, both of them would sit on a desk. So I don't know which ones would have a standing lamp, but if you went to my blog, you could see like the links to the organization that has like that test lights. They don't recommend a specific light,
Mhm.
but it tells you like what the criteria that you should be looking for is.
Mhm.
I think there's another one. What's the one? This sounds bad. Maybe I'm wrong. Northern Exposure? That sounds bad. Oh man, I don't know the name of the other company, but yeah, you want a big one. I mean, a relatively large thing. And then, yeah, the type of bulb matters. You want to make sure it doesn't have UV rays.
Right, because then you're gonna be like cooking,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah,
a
and it
big
can cause
microwave.
it can cause it can cause skin cancer or make your eyes hurt. So UV's in the sunlight, like natural sunlight has UV rays. Um, so yeah, but these lights either use bulbs that don't have UV or they have filters that eliminate it.
Yeah, I definitely try to stay away from the UV. I don't know if you can tell in the video, but I'm like a super pale redhead, so like I cannot afford. I've never touched a tanning bed, and if you
Yeah.
ever see me at the beach, I'm wearing a baseball cap, Columbia fishing shirt, like 3 layers of sunscreen. I don't play when it comes to the UV rays. Um,
Mm.
but so you just mentioned your blog. What are some ways that people can check out your work and your online program? Like, where can people reach you if they're liking this episode and want to hear more, which I'm sure they do?
Yeah. So most of my content is on YouTube. My channel is called Therapy in a Nutshell. And then I have a website. It's therapynutshell.com. There's no inna in there, just therapynutshell.com. And then I've got 6 courses online. One of them's free. It's a grounding skills course. It's got like 20 or 30 videos on how to soothe your body and those physical sensations like you're talking about of anxiety. And I've got 5 other courses that are all a lot more in depth, like just basic mental health skills, coping skills, and self care. I've got a course on how to help family and friends. So all of that, you can find that all on my website.
That is so awesome. Well, this was so great talking to you. You are so cool and just easy to talk to, and you have so much information. Like again, I was binge watching your videos on YouTube, and I was like taking notes. Like, ooh, this was good. Oh, let me write that down too because that's a keeper. So
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that people are, finding and appreciating my content. I love it. I love like getting this information out there and helping people as best I can from, my little house in the middle of nowhere. Like I feel like it's just great. It's like for me, it's my passion project, and I feel
yeah.
so happy that it's helping other people.
Well, that definitely shows in your content. And like you said, therapy some people don't have the money or the time, or they're trepidatious about, going to therapy. And even beyond that, say you do find a therapist, sometimes they're not a right fit, or they're very dismissive, or they're just not a good therapist. I hate to say it, but like some doctors aren't good, some teachers aren't that good, some therapists aren't that great. And so
Yeah.
I don't mean to sound mean. I'm also just saying this so people who are disheartened, who have had bad therapy experiences, can know that it's not all like that. You can keep going. But what I'm getting at is, it's just really cool how, like you said, you can be in your house in Utah, just out in your garden, your greenhouse, making videos, and then transporting it now like to different countries, and to Tennessee right here, and you can just flip open your phone. What is this, like 2003?
Yeah.
Gosh, my boomer is showing. You can like turn on your phone and go on to YouTube, and like bam, 2 a.m, you're feeling kind of crummy. You can go on your phone and just get something really uplifting in your own house, in your own comfort, and your own safety. So I think that's one of the ways that social media, as destructive as it can be, it can also be such an incredible tool. So I'm really glad to see you utilizing that and just creating such awesome content. So I really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun chatting with you. So.
I know. Maybe one day they'll be around too. We can talk more about scripture or some other fun topics. So
that'd be cool. That'd be great. That'd be awesome. So yeah, just let me know.
Okay, great. Well, you have a great day, okay?
Thank you. You too.
Bye. And that's a wrap for this episode. And I think it's going to be titled, You Can Rewire Your Brain. So yeah, anyways, there it is. And as always, I will include links to Emma's website, to her YouTube channel, and to the Lightbox in the description of this particular episode. And just a heads up, I have been using the Lightbox that we discussed in this episode now for 2 weeks. And I don't use it quite every day, but almost every day, for 20 minutes in the morning. And I'm not gonna lie, I have noticed a lot of improvements. I'm not sure, this is an outro, so I don't want to go on and on about that, but maybe I will do a mini episode where I discuss the Lightbox and some of the effects that I've noticed that it has on me. Send me an email or comment if that's possible on the outlet that you're listening to this episode on, and let me know if you're interested in hearing more about the Lightbox and the effects that it has. But anyways, thank you for listening. I hope it was helpful for you and that you feel like you have a little more clarity about some of the thought patterns in your mind. And I just pray that you have that motivation and that understanding that, you know what, you can rewire your mind. All hope is not lost, and you are not your diagnosis. But as always, thank you very much, and till next time.